Imagine working alone at 3 in the morning. You're in a huge, empty building. Everyone else has gone home. And suddenly, you hear someone laughing behind you. You turn around. Nobody's there. You tell yourself it was nothing, until you hear it again. Tonight, I'm telling you 3 real stories from Reddit users who experienced things they still can't explain. And the last one is the kind of story that makes you check the back seat before driving home. The first story came from someone who worked overnight in a large building. According to the person who posted it, 4 people had died in a serious accident at the location years earlier. Over time, employees started telling each other strange stories about the building. People claimed they could hear women talking. Sometimes they heard laughter. Sometimes it sounded like someone was walking nearby. But when they checked, there was nobody there. At first, the poster didn't think much of it. Weird sounds happen in large buildings. Pipes make noises. Machinery moves. Air conditioning kicks on. There are 100 explanations for something you hear at night. But then something happened with a pair of keys. One employee had his keys attached to his belt. At some point during his shift, he realized they were gone. He assumed someone had taken them as a joke. So he walked back toward the break area, expecting to find his co-workers laughing about it. But nobody knew what he was talking about. His keys were simply gone. So he turned around and walked back through the building. He was alone. And that's when he heard it. Keys hitting the floor, right behind him. He turned around. Nothing. No person. No movement. Just darkness. He took a few steps back and looked around. And that's when he noticed something. His keys weren't on the floor. They were sitting on a table he had already walked past. He didn't understand how they got there. But apparently, that wasn't even the strangest thing that happened in that building. Another employee refused to use the women's locker room. Her reason? On her first night working there, she heard someone crying. Not a machine, not an animal, a person. She described it as a quiet, sniffling cry, the kind of sound you would expect from someone sitting alone on a bench. So she went inside to check. There was nobody there, completely empty. And yet she was convinced she had heard someone crying only seconds earlier. But the part of the story that really gets me was the feeling people experienced when they were alone. The building had large open areas, and according to the poster, whenever someone sat with their back facing one of those open spaces, they would sometimes get an overwhelming feeling that someone was approaching them, not just a vague feeling. They would become convinced that somebody was walking directly toward them. Sometimes they would turn around expecting to see someone reaching for their shoulder, and there would be absolutely nobody there. The poster said it happened to them multiple times, every single time. Nothing was behind them. Was it the building settling at night? Their imagination? Some psychological response to being alone? Maybe. But there's one detail that makes this story particularly unsettling. Multiple employees reported hearing similar things. Voices, laughter, footsteps, crying. And nobody could agree on where the sounds were coming from. Imagine being the last person in that building every night, knowing that other people had heard the same things before you. The second story happened to someone who worked night shifts at a care facility. And unlike the first story, this one happened to a person who wasn't alone. Years ago, the poster worked overnight shifts as a nursing assistant. There was an older resident named John. According to the story, John had a habit of whistling. Random little tunes. Nothing unusual. The kind of thing you might hear someone doing while walking through a hallway. One night, the poster was sitting in the center area of the facility with several other employees and the nurse on duty. It was quiet. Most of the residents were asleep. Then they heard whistling, coming from the dining area. The poster immediately recognized it. It sounded exactly like John. So they casually asked the others, "What is John doing up this late?" Nobody answered. Instead, someone looked at them and told them something that made their stomach drop. John had died 2 days earlier. The poster had no explanation. They knew John's whistle. They had heard it many times. And they were absolutely certain that's what they had heard that night. Maybe it was another resident. Maybe it was a sound coming from outside. Maybe their brain simply connected a random noise to something familiar. That's the rational explanation. But imagine hearing the exact same sound made by someone you know, and then finding out that person had been dead for 2 days. The poster said that even more than 15 years later, the memory still gave them chills. And honestly, I can understand why. Because working nights already changes the way your brain reacts to sounds. During the day, a strange noise doesn't mean much. There are cars, people, conversations, doors opening, phones ringing. But at 3 in the morning, when the entire building is quiet, every little sound becomes noticeable. A floorboard, a distant cough, a door closing somewhere down the hallway. And if you hear a familiar voice coming from an empty room, you're probably going to investigate, even if you really don't want to. And that brings us to the third story. Because this time, the person wasn't inside a building. They were completely alone outside, in the middle of the night. The third story came from someone working night shifts near a large orchard. The location was isolated. There was basically one road in and one road out. Surrounding the area were rows of trees. At night, it became incredibly dark. The poster had worked there long enough to become comfortable with the environment. They knew the normal sounds, the normal animals, the normal noises made by the equipment. Then one night, at around 2:30 in the morning, they heard something completely out of place. An alarm clock, somewhere in the darkness. Beep, beep, beep. At first, they assumed it was coming from one of the workers' portable offices, so they started driving toward the sound. As their headlights moved across the orchard, they saw something, a dark figure, several rows away. It appeared to move behind a tree. The poster stopped and stared into the darkness. Nothing moved. The alarm continued. Beep, beep. They got out of the car and immediately regretted it, because now there was nothing between them and the darkness. They used the flashlight on their phone and walked toward the sound. Eventually, they found a small portable office area. There were some chairs, a table, and sitting on that table was a tiny battery-powered alarm clock. That's what had been making the noise. The poster grabbed it and turned it off. Silence. Complete silence. But they still couldn't stop thinking about the figure they had seen between the trees. They looked back toward the orchard. Nothing. No movement. No person. Just rows and rows of trees disappearing into the darkness. They got back into their car and drove away. Later, they apparently realized just how strange the whole thing was. Someone had placed a working alarm clock out there, in the middle of nowhere, at around 2:30 in the morning. And while they were investigating it, they thought they saw someone hiding among the trees. There are explanations for almost everything in this story. Maybe the figure was an animal. Maybe it was a worker. Maybe the headlights created an illusion. Maybe someone had simply forgotten the alarm clock outside. But there's something about hearing a random alarm in an empty orchard at 2:30 in the morning that would make almost anyone uncomfortable. Because when you're alone, you don't know what you're actually hearing. And you don't know who else might be there. They were completely alone outside, in the middle of the night. 3 stories, 3 completely different people, and 3 experiences that they still remember years later. Maybe none of them were paranormal. Maybe every single one has a perfectly normal explanation. But that's the strange thing about working at night. You don't need ghosts to scare yourself. Sometimes, all it takes is an empty building, a familiar voice, or a tiny alarm clock ringing somewhere you know nobody should be. Which story would have scared you the most? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more real stories from Reddit, subscribe.